What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Vic Choksy, and welcome to today's edition of Chok Talk, brought to you by Sports Intel. Today's guest is my guy, Nate Jacobson. Nate's a Chicago guy. He's a sports betting analyst over at Stadium. He's doing some great stuff there. So, make sure you check him out. Before we drop off, I'll let him drop his handle and let you know a little bit more about his work. But let's kick this off. Nate, how you doing today, my man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to talking about NFL Week 7. It feels like the year has really flown by, but it's good to have football, especially because a few months ago, wasn't sure if that would be the case.
Definitely, man. Well, I know how busy you are, so I appreciate your time. Before we jump into some games, I always like to talk to my guests just about kind of how they got into the game. So I want to ask you about gambling. Just how'd you get into this space? Whether it's something you've been doing as a kid, just through work. So I'll kind of open up the floor to you and tell your story a little bit.
Yeah, so I've always been a big sports fan growing up in Chicago. I remember one of my first memories, or at least positive memories of my life, when I was 5 years old and Michael Jordan and the Bulls won their sixth title game. I definitely remember that last shot clearly in my mind, and really can't think of much before that. At least that's memorable in a good way, I guess. So always been a big sports fan. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs preferred over the White Sox. And when I was younger, I would have trouble waking up in the morning to go to school. So my parents, to incentivize that, said they would get the Chicago Tribune sports section for
Nice.
me, and that would help me get up. So I'd read the Chicago Tribune sports section every morning before the day. And I also didn't have cable. So that was how I got my sports news back then when I was younger. And I remember, I think I was 9 years old. It was like the 2001 NFL season. I started looking at some of the pages in the sports section and noticed there was the point spreads for all the games, the odds. So I looked into the NFL, and I remember asking my dad what that meant, and he kind of explained it to me. So from there, I would circle the teams I liked. I don't even know if I was looking too much in the numbers or just the teams maybe I was rooting for. But because of that, it kind of helped me understand what the point spread was and kind of took from there the odds and probability. Obviously, I wasn't betting when I was 9 years old or
Yeah.
as a child. Definitely want to clear that up. But it was just kind of good to look at sports at a different perspective, I guess, and just learn about something. And back then, obviously, sports betting was not mainstream at all, but turns out it ended up being mainstream. So that's good that I guess I started looking at that then, even if I wasn't betting, just learning about it and kind of getting appreciation of it. And then I don't really remember doing much betting, looking at betting or anything in high school, but I remember in college, especially sophomore year, I started doing a lot of reading about sports betting, different strategies, just different things about the sports betting industry that fascinated me. And again, I wasn't really betting much on sports, but I was just really fascinated. And sometimes we'd be with my friends in college and we would like make side bets and stuff just for fun and keep us interested in maybe a game that we didn't particularly would watch unless we had some action on the line. So it was just good to like learn about that. And then after college, got a little bit more into betting. I was working at a company called 120 Sports in the West Loop of Chicago, and we'd work late nights, weekends, and covered at pretty much every sport. And I learned that if you look at the betting market when it comes to any sport, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, even a sport like golf, you just kind of understand who's good in the sport, and just kind of you learn a lot about the sport and the players and also the teams. So I thought that was just a good way to kind of keep sports fresh and fascinated, because I was surrounded by sports all the time at work. So a lot of people who worked there were also into betting. So that was kind of a way to connect with your coworkers, and that was a lot of fun. And then about 2 years ago in 2018, got the opportunity when 120 Sports turned into Stadium, which is a digital sports network and over-the-air 24-hour sports station that's based out of Chicago, where the United Center is in the fifth floor, just the building east of the United Center. And I got an opportunity to produce some sports betting content, worked on some videos, been writing articles for about 3 years. And last year was on a sports betting show called the Fantasy Sportsbook. So that was a great opportunity. And also I have my own show that we used to do some shows on Twitch, and now I do it on Periscope and Stadium's Twitter account called Weekend Warriors. I started it last year on Saturday mornings for college football and the NFL. And now I'm still doing it this year. If you ever want to tune in, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. I do that the Sunday slate of the NFL, kind of previewing that. But because other sports were going on, the NHL, the NBA, obviously the MLB in its normal time slot, and then also some golf majors have been kind of covering other sports in that Sunday morning window, along with the NFL. So that's kind of a long, I guess, 19-year journey of sports betting, even though I'm 28 and I've only been betting for a short amount of time and legally just for a couple months here in Illinois. It's a lot of fun just to be part of it, and an exciting time to be in the media industry part of it. There's a lot of opportunities to come along. I know this is just the beginning, so really excited to what's to come, and happy that I kind of took advantage of that time when I was younger to learn about things when it was less popular.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing, man. That was awesome. I won't show my age, but you saying watching Michael Jordan win 6 at the age you did, I won't tell you how old I was when I watched it, but kind of the same story for me, man. I grew up in Chicago, and literally my first memory is, okay, I'll tell you my age a little bit, is Walter Payton winning the Super Bowl. And I was around your age when you saw Jordan win that. So that was like my first favorite team, favorite player. Then it was like the 89 Cubs. And then it was the Jordan Bulls, right? And so that's again why I love sports and why we're probably here today. And so and I found you actually from your golf picks. And so we had similar picks once golf resumed, and we hit on some really nice futures for those tournaments. So that's when I started kind of following you and your Chicago guys. So it's been fun to kind of see you throughout the summer as well, doing well. So
sometimes I wish I was a little bit older so I could have remembered the 85 Bears and also fully remembered all 6 Bulls championships. But to live through the Blackhawks, I guess this dynasty of 3 cups in 6 years as a young adult, just over in that 18 to 24 range, and also the Cubs win the World Series, cannot complain at all. But I was Walter Payton twice for Halloween, I think when I was 6 and 7. So even though I never saw him play while living, I was a huge fan of him. So Payton and Jordan were my heroes growing up, and I guess I paid tribute to Walter by being him for Halloween, even though I didn't see him play.
Nice. I love it. Yeah. I mean, the guy was a monster, bro. There's nothing else to say.
I watched the highlights.
Exactly. Yeah, and so those are great times, man. I'm glad I got to live through it. And I will say I was still a little young, so I actually loved this past Cubs title. Like, one day when you get older, like you'll be married or have kids, and then your like wife lets you out and you have to like plan stuff. And like for that month, somehow me and my best friends that we all grew up watching Cubs together, all our wives let us out every night. So we hit the bars every single night. We were in Wrigley Field in Wrigleyville when we won the series. So it was just something that I will always remember. That's one of my favorite times. But that's why we love sports, right? And that's why we're here where we're at today. We wouldn't be doing this unless we had passion for the game. So
for sure.
But no, thanks for sharing, man. Let's talk about this week's games. There are 4 big games that I kind of wanted to highlight, pick your brain on, see if there's an actual bet that you actually made or side or over that you like. So I'll start with a game that I really think are 2 of the best teams in the NFL right now, and that's Steelers-Titans. So the line's been jumping all over the place. It was Pittsburgh -1.5. Now I'm seeing it at Titans -1.5, -1, a little bit around there. So just opening it up to you. What are your thoughts on this game? Do you like a total or side or prop or anything?
Yeah, I would say the line move is definitely where you want to start with breaking this game down. I remember seeing Wednesday morning, it was Steelers 1.5, -2. And then within a few hours, I saw some money coming in on Tennessee just based on the odds screen that I use. And then Tennessee by Wednesday afternoon settled as a 1-point favorite, which, I mean, going from 1-1 isn't a huge move just because the odds of a game ending in a tie aren't huge. But I thought it was significant and kind of going to lead into the play I like in this game. And that's to tease the Steelers up to hopefully 7.5. If the Steelers are a 1.5 point underdog, you take them through 3, you take them through 7. I think this game is decided by a touchdown either way. So when Tennessee was an underdog in this game, I was actually planning on teasing the Titans up to plus 7.5 or plus 8 and pairing them with a team maybe like the Lions up to plus 8.5 this week. So the teaser is the way to go in this game. It's an interesting game because both teams are 5-0, but I'm kind of uncertain what each team is. And another note for this game is this game was supposed to be played in week 4. And I believe it was the first postponed game because of COVID-19 in the NFL. So this week, the Ravens and Steelers were supposed to play each other. That game is now in week 8. The Ravens now have a bye. They moved this game to week 7. And the Steelers, who weren't planning on having an early bye week, they actually were having a bye week in week 8, now have to play this week. And that's huge because I'm sure the Steelers would have loved to have a bye week after playing the Ravens this week in the original schedule. So just kind of some scheduling dynamics and why this game is played this week. But there's 2 injuries on both sides that are big. Offensive lineman Taylor Lewan for the Titans, a huge piece, a left tackle protecting Ryan Tannehill's blind side. And then Devin Bush for the Steelers, who's a very important middle linebacker for them. So those probably cancel each other out when it comes to the point spread. A game where if I had to pick a side, I guess I would take the Steelers as underdogs, but if the Titans were still underdogs, I'd probably lean towards them. And my way to play the game, even though it's a high total, I like the Steelers if you can tease them to plus 7.5.
I like that, man. I was thinking more along the lines of like a live bet because I see this game literally coming down to the wire. So whoever was going to score first, if I can get, 4 points on either side, that's who I'm looking at. But to me, the Titans are just they've impressed me, man. Mike Vrabel, he's a genius. We saw last week some of the amazing stuff, innovative stuff that he did. And Ryan Tannehill, man, I saw this stat today. In his last 18 starts, the Chiefs' Patrick Mahomes and Ryan Tannehill have both thrown 40 touchdowns against 8 interceptions, and they've also both run for 6 touchdowns. So literally, Tannehill's up there playing at a level as good as Patrick Mahomes, which is amazing to see. So I think the injuries are going to be big to watch for the rest of the season, not only this game, right? Because both of those guys were studs, and as soon as Taylor Lewan went out, Tannehill got hit, and so now they're going up against Watt on that side. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. And Bush was great for the Steelers. That he had them humming. So, I like your tease of that game. I'll probably watch it for a live bet and see if I can get some value on either side. So let's look at a second game. We got to go with our hometown squad, man. The Bears, Rams, Monday Night Football. The line is pretty much settled at 6 right now across the board. It started at 7, which I thought was a little high. But right now it's at about 6. Just want to pick your brains. What are you thinking when it comes to this game? Whether it's a bet, total or side, or you could be sitting it out as well. So you don't have to bet these games. These are just 4 of the big ones that I thought were going to be like interesting matchups when it comes to the odds.
Yeah, definitely. I think there actually is some betting value in the Bears. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Bears fan, because I'll pick against the Bears, but I'll bet on the Bears. I really, when it comes to sports betting, put my biases aside, or at least do my best, because if I don't, I know I'll be in trouble. So the Bears are 5-1, which feels a little misleading if you look who they played. The Lions, and they were down double digits, but they came back against Matt Patricia's defense. And then week 3, they did the same thing against Dan Quinn's Falcons, and he got fired a few weeks later. Sandwich in between, they barely held off the Giants, and then they looked very poor against the Colts, beat the Bucs in a game that I didn't feel like they won the game. When I woke up the next morning, I was like, how did the Bears win that game? And if you looked at the stats, they were outgained by 100 yards. They definitely had some fortune with turnovers that they were able to create. So I guess, you can't rely on turnovers, but if the Bears are to have success, they're going to have to force turnovers. And then last week, I thought they played their best game, and I kind of expected them to play better in that game. Just having the extra time off, Nick Foles kind of had 2 starts in 5 days, and I thought that just that extra time would be able to integrate the offense. Remember, Matt Nagy picked Nick Foles to be the backup for Trubisky, and I think wanted to start him from the start. but I'm sure Ryan Pace wanted to save face and have Trubisky have one more shot. But Foles is very familiar with the offensive coaching staff of the Bears. John DeFilippo, his quarterback coach, who was also his quarterback coach in Philadelphia when they won a Super Bowl, and they were together in Jacksonville last year when DeFilippo was the offensive coordinator. Also, Bill Lazor, the Bears offensive coordinator, they have familiarity from the past when Foles' previous stops. So now that Nick Foles is the starter and the Bears are 5-1, and even though it's not an impressive 5-1, I think there's some good things to look for the Bears and maybe some opportunity to buy low, because I just frankly don't think the betting market is respecting them. And the defense has shown some flashes of that 2018 level, especially with forcing turnovers and kind of pressuring the passer. I would say this week is their biggest test of the season to date, especially on the road against the Rams. But I don't know about the Rams. I would kind of wonder if they should be favored by this many points, because if you look at who the Rams played and who they beat the 4 teams in the NFC East. Going into last night's game between the Giants and Eagles, the teams in the NFC East were combined 5-18-1 with 3 wins against each other. So you're just kind of wondering if how impressive the Rams are. You look back at that game against the Bills when they were down by 25 and had to come back, and now the Bills have lost 2 straight. Kind of wonder about the quality of that loss, I guess. That they fell short in that game. So I'm just not sure if the Rams are as good as their 4-2 record, and maybe they're just being a little bit rated higher than most NFL teams. So I think I'm going to fade the Rams in this game, more of a play on the Bears, and take the Bears at +6. At 5.5, I'd stay away, but I think at 6, the Bears are worth a play on Monday night. Another thing with the Rams is they're a very top-heavy team where they have some very highly paid players, so the depth kind of struggles. So if those highly paid players aren't playing well, you can definitely find some holes in the team to exploit.
I agree with you 100%, man. I think 6, there's a lot of value on the Bears. And again, I'm not a homer. I'm not, putting my biases aside. To me, yes, we know about the struggles of the offense. They're bottom 5 in every statistical category. Nick Foles admitted it himself and said, hey, we're working on this. And like you said, now he's been with the squad a couple of weeks, no preseason, right? So getting familiar with the players on the offensive side of the ball. He knows this offense. So I do think they're going to get better, but the defense is legit, man. Statistically, they're actually better than 2 years ago through 6 games, which is crazy to think about because that D was nasty, right? And we've had some turnovers actually called back. A couple of Eddie Jackson pick 6
Sure.
called back. And so the biggest thing I remember is 2 years ago, I'm sure you remember this, Sunday Night Football, Rams-Bears. Jared Goff looked like he wanted to go home after the first quarter because he was taking a beating, right? And so
yeah, but that was bear weather, so
it was
different thing.
I agree. But I
kidding.
feel like they're going to be able to kind of get to him again, right? This game,
right?
And his stats in 2 games against the Bears are 50% completion, 353 total passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 44.5 passer rating. So again, against this, I believe in the defense, and that's why I like the points. I see this as kind of a ugly, low-scoring game. And anytime I see a game as an under, it doesn't matter to the Bears. I also like taking a big dog in that type of scenario. So I think the defense is going to keep us in the game, and it might be like a 1916 type grinder coming down to the last field goal. And that's how I have it playing out.
Yeah, and it says a lot that the total is 45, which if you've been following the NFL betting market, the totals are usually like on average in the low 50s. So anything in the mid 40s, which may have been normal a few years ago, but now that's almost one of the lowest totals on the board. So I think that says a lot. And when there's a low total in a game, I always tend to look to the underdog because every point is more of a premium.
Exactly. And when you're getting close to a touchdown, this fits the bill for me in many different ways. So nice, man. I'm glad we're on the same side there. The next game, I've actually seen very, very smart people on opposite spectrums of this game. I actually don't have a play. I wanted to just throw it out there and see if there was anything you liked, but it's Seattle, Arizona, 2 really fun teams to watch. Russ just does his thing no matter how, whenever you think they're going to regress or not cover, the guy just completes a 4th and 7, a 4th and 10 in the 4th quarter, and they keep winning, right? So is this the week that they get knocked off? Are the Cardinals for real, or what are you seeing in this game? I'm seeing the line bounce around everywhere, but 3.5 is kind of what I'm seeing it settle at right now across the board. Seattle -3.5.
Yes, I'm glad you brought this game up. And the reason I was laughing while you were introducing the game is because while you were talking about all the times Russell Wilson has pulled off what seemingly was miracles for the Seahawks, I just thought about all the bets that I've lost in the past, and it's my own fault. That's what happens when you're betting against elite quarterbacks in the NFL. But
Yeah.
if I think there's value in other areas, then I'm going to take that team and ride them, because if I get off them like I did when they played the Vikings a few weeks ago and they didn't cover, I kind of felt like an idiot because I picked against the Seahawks a lot last year. I know a lot of people love Pete Carroll, but he doesn't make the best decisions in game, and really not a fan of their offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer. And it says a lot that even though they had Russell Wilson, they were one of the teams that would run the ball the most. And now there's this movement, let Russ cook. And that reason why is because Brian Schottenheimer really was holding Russell Wilson back, and he wasn't throwing until late in the game. And that's why they were playing a lot of games that are close and maybe even trying to come back. So now that they're throwing more, Seattle has looked very good offensively, and they definitely have some really good weapons. And I mean, Wilson throws one of the best deep balls in the NFL. Regardless of all that stuff, I still picked against the Seahawks the first 4 weeks of the year. And even though the results didn't go my way, I think that I've made okay predictions, especially in the NFL where it's so hard. I remember in week 2, they were playing the Patriots, and if the Patriots were a 4.5 point underdog or 4, maybe a close 5, and the Patriots lost by 5 points, but the Patriots failed to convert a 2-point conversion. And then at the end of the game, the Seahawks stopped them at the goal line. So they were literally,
Cam got stuffed at the goal line.
Yeah, the Seahawks were 18 inches from losing that game outright, and somehow they covered the 4.5 point spread. Week 3, they play the Cowboys, and the Cowboys offense actually torched the Seahawks, and the Cowboys fell short. They gave Russell Wilson enough time. He scores. They go up 5. The spread's 5.5. They go for 2. They don't get the 2-point conversion. Wait a second. There's a roughing the passer. Of course, on the second try, when it's half the distance of goal, they get it. They win by 7 and they cover. Then against the Dolphins,
that's the game that killed you.
That was the game that I would make that bet 10 times out of 10 over again if you gave me plus 6.5 on the Dolphins, and I knew how that game would play out, because the Dolphins, I believe, kicked 5 field goals. They punted once. There was a 1-point margin where the Seahawks were up with like 20 seconds in the half, and somehow the Dolphins let a receiver get behind them. And of course, Seattle scores to grow up 8.
Yep.
Just so frustrating to bet the Seahawks. And then in week 5, I say, okay, I'm done. I'm not betting against Russell Wilson. And then they play the Vikings. They're a 7-point favorite. The Vikings in control most of the games, and some turnovers by Cousins, and the Vikings bounce back. I don't know. I don't want to go too much into that end of scenario, end game situation, but basically like 7 things had to go right for the Seahawks to pull out the 1-point win. And they go on to 5-0. The Seahawks, they had a bye last week, maybe get some players healthy back on defense for this game against the Cardinals, which is what we're talking about. And I think I'm going to go back to picking against the Seahawks, but it's more of a numbers play. I think this at 3.5, it's a bit too high. I think it should be more like 2, I guess 2.5. Maybe you give a little bit of a boost because Seattle's off a bye. One reason I'm staying away as like a bigger bet on the Cardinals is they just played on Monday night against the Cowboys. They looked really good. And usually I don't like playing teams who just maybe came off their best performance of the season. And they looked good in a lot of areas. But at the same time, I looked at Kyler Murray's stats from last game. He was only 9 of 24 for 188 yards. And 2 of the receptions were an 80-yarder to Christian Kirk, which led to a touchdown. And then DeAndre Hopkins, 60 yards. So You take that out, that's I don't know the math, but it's not great that he had 140 of his 188 yards on 2 long completions where the receivers did most of the work. So a little bit worried about the Cardinals and the situation, especially the Seahawks coming off a bye. So the situation doesn't really support the Cardinals, but I think the math supports the Cardinals at 3.5, just because I think the Seahawks it's not sustainable what they're doing. And I think that some of the injuries that they still have, it looks like Jamal Adams won't be back for this game. I think it's going to eventually catch up to them. And would not be surprised the Cardinals went straight up if Seattle doesn't have it. And now that this game's a Sunday night game, I'm not sure if that changes my mind, but maybe if it is and you like the Cardinals, wait until kickoff, because I think the public will come in on Seattle and maybe push that up to Seahawks -4.
For sure. I think Vegas' odds makers are going to need the cards come Sunday night for sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be all Seattle money like it is early. So, again, I was laughing like you were laughing because I got burned on a lot of those bets, man. The Miami one kills me the most, especially
Yeah.
I felt good going into the half. I literally was about to send my boy a text like, hey, great half. And
Right.
then that bomb happens. And, of
Yeah.
course, like you said, they score a touchdown. They don't even get a field goal.
Right.
And they had so many chances. They were driving the ball the whole time, and they're kicking field goals, and it's just
5
like
field goals. Yeah.
and so like I have PTSD betting against this guy now. I think after all of those different losses that you said, and that's why I'm staying off of this game, and because of the Monday night thing, right? I don't generally like to bet on teams off of Monday night, and wins and good wins, like you said.
Especially looking that good. If the Cowboys won, I would have definitely been more looking to take Arizona. But I think if the Cowboys beat the Cardinals, we'd probably get like a 4.5. So that would have been some line value. Now I don't think we're getting as much line value, even though we are near a key number, and I think it should be less than a key number. But yeah, it would have been a perfect scenario if the Cardinals lost on Monday night, not just for this game, but also for the numerous Cowboys bets and teasers that I had last week that were pending into Monday, because Sunday was a very good day, but the Cowboys kind of took away a little bit of juice.
That was brutal, man. And
yeah.
And so, no, I agree with you on that game as well. Before I segue into the last game that I had, you brought up the Cowboys a little bit, and they're just decimated on that O-line, man. I'll quickly throw it to you because I can't call them the Skins anymore. I like the Washington football team this weekend. Like, I feel like their D line against that Cowboys O line is going to be trouble for Dallas, no matter how good their playmakers are. And so I actually have the Washington football team circled for some of my contests this weekend. So do you have you thought about that game at all?
Yeah, I like Dallas a little bit. Just had to pick them. The look ahead line in this game, or the game before the Cowboys played on Monday night, was -3.
3, yeah.
So there was a 3-point line move, but honestly, we always talk about like overreacting over 60 minutes. But the way the Cowboys played, I think that was a warranted line move, because I think a lot of times you thought maybe, the Cowboys will have one strong effort kind of rallying around Dak for Andy Dalton, and they clearly failed in that situation. So I think the downgrade of 3 points is warranted. I just don't think Washington is a good team, and at a pick 'em price, I just can't get behind them. So I kind of, in my article I write on WatchStadium.com, kind of said like I'd consider the Cowboys, but looking at the Cowboys' offensive line injuries and that the Redskins have a strong defensive pass rush led by first-round pick Chase Young, I'm going to have to stay away from this game and kind of just ignore it. And I wouldn't talk you out of picking Washington for contest, because, this is still a big game for both teams. I mean, the winner of this game is right there, or maybe even the driver. If Dallas wins, they're in I guess Philly. Okay. When the Giants were winning, I was thinking, wow, that Dallas-Washington game, whoever wins that game is going to be like right in the thick of it for the NFC East. And if Dallas won, they'd be in the driver's seat. But now that's a little bit different with Philly winning. I think wins are going to be hard to come by for both teams when they're playing out of division. So I think I just talked myself into just completely staying away. But don't want to talk you out of anything if you liked Washington.
No, that's fair.
Just because of that huge a mismatch in the trenches, which is so important in the NFL. And we saw the Washington football team beat Philadelphia in a large part because they were able to get to Carson Wentz when the Eagles had a very depleted offensive line.
Yep, that's kind of how I see this game playing out. And my other rule of thumb has just been like you mentioned, this division is so bad that I've always kind of taken the dog or faded the public literally just blindly, because I feel like all these teams are kind of the same. And we saw it last night a little bit too, right? Like I was on the Giants, and it always comes down to the last play. And we saw it last week with Washington as well, right? So that was another reason. But I see it's playing out similar to the Washington-Philly game and Chase Young is finally getting healthier. And so that's where I see an advantage. But we'll see, man. Maybe I should just stay away from this terrible division and terrible game. So I'll leave it to the last game, and it is Patriots-Niners. I know you like a side in this game, and I actually think that we will be on the same side, but I'll open it up to you. I see it as Pats -2 right now, kind of sitting along that line.
Yeah, we're talking about the spread, I like the Pats -2, but I think the better bet is taking the Patriots at a -125, -130 money line. And this is So far, my biggest bet in football this weekend. A lot to like here. I think it's kind of a buy low, sell high opportunity, which I always like to look for. The look ahead line in this game was New England -5.5. So we saw a 3.5-point adjustment based on the results last week. Now, you look at the results last week, the 49ers were a 3-point underdog at home to the Rams. If you look ahead at the 49ers schedule, it is very, very tough, which includes this game. They have a trip to Seattle next week. That game last week, they had to throw everything out there. That was like a Kyle Shanahan masterpiece. They had to have a good script and also play very strong for the full 60 minutes just to eke out a win against the Rams. So that's a game I expected the 49ers to play well in. I thought that line was a little bit inflated. So that was what happened in that game. It was the Sunday Night Football game. Now, if you look at the Patriots, they played the Broncos, and it was a very interesting situation. I'd say probably for both teams, but especially for the Patriots because they weren't able to practice the Friday before because they had a COVID scare. And I think Bill Belichick even said after the game, we need to get more practice. And I think that really impacted them. And they lost to the Broncos, who I believe kicked 6 field goals last week to get the win in New England. And that was a line that dropped from 10 to 7. So a pretty big line move on game day in favor of the Broncos. And I think a lot of that had to do with some of the uncertainty about New England. Now it looks like New England has a full week of practice. You're kind of getting them at a cheap price here at -2 against a 49ers team coming off a game that they had to have. The 49ers still picked up some more injuries, and they're already banged up. I like also the interesting factor of Bill Belichick going against a quarterback he knows very well, who was in his room for a long time, and Jimmy G. He traded Jimmy G to San Francisco, even though it didn't sound like he wanted to, but he ended up trading for him. But I also know that Bill Belichick will know his tendencies and will be able to game plan around that. The 49ers really have a great pass catcher in George Kittle, but the Patriots are very good at shutting down opposing tight ends, or the focal point of the offense, putting their best defensive player on the best offensive player and game planning around that. So it all kind of adds up with the line value, the situation, liking the Patriots -2. I personally bet them on the money line, but that is my best bet for NFL Week 7.
Nice. I love it, man. You nailed every single point that I pretty much thought about this game. The buy low, sell high situation for both teams. Recency bias from last weekend.
Right.
The Belichick, aka Hoodie, off of a loss against a quarterback he knows, right? Like he probably hasn't slept. He's been in the facility, breaking all this stuff down. And I actually like that you brought up the schedule because to me, again, I know it's the NFL. These guys are professionals. They don't look ahead per se like college teams, a lot of younger kids, but they got a big game against Seattle coming up next week, right? And that division game could make or break their year, just like last week, right? They knew they had to pull out that game. So, little look ahead. And then, like you brought up, the Pats just going through a lot last week. It wasn't a good spot for them. They're getting a lot of guys back off of a loss. So I love the Pats this week. That's one of my favorite plays this weekend as well. So I'm loving that. I'm glad we're on the same page on a couple of these games, man. It's going to be a fun weekend. I think me and you talked offline a little bit. It is a tougher card. Like I felt like last 2 weeks were a little bit easier. This is a tough card. So I'm going to be happy to just come away with some green and hopefully move that on to week 8.
Yeah. On Tuesday night, I was really having trouble figuring out any game, honestly. But then once this line kind of dropped to under a field goal and I thought about it more and some of the situational advantages that New England could have and some of the possible matchup advantages as the 49ers are kind of still injury plagued from, I guess it was that trip to MetLife Stadium in week 2 that kind of just derailed their season where Jimmy G got hurt, Mostert got hurt, and he's hurt again. But more importantly, Nick Bosa, who was one of their key players on last year's team that made the Super Bowl, especially because there's not only Nick Bosa, but Dee Ford will not be in this game. So the pass rush isn't what it was like last year for the 49ers. And like you said last week, that was a game they had to have because you have New England this week. You have the Seattle in 2 weeks. I don't know the schedule off the top of my head, but I know it's a very, very tough schedule where they might be underdog in most of those games. So they kind of threw out everything last week, and I think this is the time for the Patriots to bounce back because they really need to get a win to kind of, I wouldn't say to keep pace with Buffalo because Buffalo's dropped a few games, but they're playing Buffalo next week, so a win this week would be huge for New England.
No, definitely. Well, I appreciate your time, man. It's been fun chopping it up with you, getting to know you a little bit, breaking down some games this weekend. Before we jump off, again, let everyone know where they can kind of find your work on Twitter or at Stadium, and just do your thing.
Yeah, so follow me on Twitter at Nate Jacobson1. I think that's the best place to find all my work. Every Thursday morning, I publish an article on watchstadium.com, kind of going over every game in the NFL and kind of where I see it at the time. I'm in a contest that uses the Westgate Superbook, their super contest line. So we're at the pick 7 sides a week. So I kind of look through that and see where I was looking at when I write that article on Wednesday, and it's published on Thursday. So check that out for this week. I wrote up Patriots as my clear-cut choice, first choice. And also Sunday morning, Weekend Warriors on the Stadium Twitter account and Periscope channel, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central, going over everything in the NFL slate. But this week, we'll also talk about the World Series, and that we have games Friday, Saturday, and then Game 5, which is now necessary on Sunday night. So we'll definitely preview that game. It's an hour long. So come in, join the show, hop into the chat. Any questions, any fantasy betting questions, come at them, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. It's a lot of fun. So make sure to check that out on Sunday morning.
Nice. I love that. Well, thanks again, man. Let's make some money, and then I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Vic. Have a good one.
You too.